Conquering our fears is a central topic in the Peaceful Warrior's Way. This isn't the way of the peaceful poet. It could be. It's not the way of the peaceful dancer or musician. It is the way of the peaceful warrior, referring to a warrior spirit. We face many kinds of fears in our everyday lives we'll get into in a few moments. But I want to point out first that even though fear is an emotion, and one of our other video modules also talked about the secret of emotions, we need to pay particular attention to fear and how to overcome it in our everyday lives, because this is the warrior's way. And I think this speaks to the warrior spirit in you as well. Fear can be a wonderful servant, but it's a terrible master. Fear can save our lives. Gavin de Becker, in his book, The Gift of Fear, talks about how fear can be useful. Bill Kipp, a martial arts expert, in his book, Turning Fear into Power, talks about how to use fear for self-defense situations. So fear can be a wonderful servant, but if it's allowed to master us, it can limit our lives, because when you look back on your life someday, you will not regret what you've done as much as what you haven't done. And often we haven't done something in our lives because of fear, self-doubt, insecurity. And this is why we need to address this topic. So let's first of all understand fear at its essence. We know the feeling. If we describe it physically, the way they used to do in the old days with Gestalt therapy, physically based fear, butterflies in the stomach, heart beating, sometimes tunnel vision, maybe a dry mouth, this feeling of nervousness and anxiety. We don't like that feeling. We're not supposed to like it. It's not designed to like. It's a biological evolutionary mechanism to save our lives. For example, if you're walking down the street one night, you didn't want to walk in this part of the city, but your car broke down and the cell phone battery went dead, so you're heading toward a service station to get some help. And you're approaching a corner. It's dark out, you don't know this part of the city, and suddenly you're feeling afraid. It comes from nowhere. Maybe the hair stand up on your arms. And you don't know why, but there's this feeling, this intuitive feeling. I would listen to that feeling. I'm not somebody that just says, whenever you're afraid, do it anyway, because there are two kinds of fears. There's objective fears and subjective fears. And one of those fears you listen to, the other you don't. The objective fear has to do with your physical body. If you're feeling afraid around a situation that could injure you or kill you, you want to pay attention to that. It might be telling you to avoid a situation, to prepare well, to take precautions. So that's when fear can be a wonderful servant. It's meant for that in our biology. It evolved with us. Someone who has no fear won't last long in this world. We sometimes call daredevils fearless. You know, I had a friend, a very good friend named Dar Robinson, who was on television. You can look him up on YouTube. The most spectacular stuntman, one of them who ever lived. He specialized in high falls from helicopters, and it was in many movies. And Dar told me that every big stunt he did, he was terrified. But yet people from the outside looking in think, oh, these guys are fearless. No, being fearless is like not being able to feel pain. You know, some of us think, wow, wouldn't it be great to not feel any pain? There have been people through neurological problems who felt no pain, and they could die of getting a cut on their foot. They wouldn't even know they were cut. So whether we like pain or not, it can help save our life. It warns us. And fear is the same kind of early warning system. So let's appreciate it first. You see, every emotion has a story to tell, has information for us. So this isn't about denying or just disregarding emotions. But we don't want fear to master us. This is a key. Most of the fears that we encounter in our everyday life is not abject terror. It's usually the fear of expressing our feelings to someone or telling someone something we need to tell them, but it might have a reaction and we feel anxious about it. Often our fears surface as self-doubt, insecurity. So there are many different fears that can constrict our life, because we don't like to feel the feeling, and then it gets smaller and smaller, our lives, trying to stay comfortable and avoid that feeling. When the fear is subjective, when we're afraid of being embarrassed, of being rejected, of looking foolish, that's the time. That doesn't break bones, doesn't hurt us. Even though people said I almost died from embarrassment, I doubt it. So when the fear is subjective, cut through it, do it anyway. You know, I have a friend who's terrified of flying in an airplane. Actually, he said, I'm not afraid of flying, I'm afraid of crashing. And because of that fear, for a while, he didn't fly. He said, you know, I discovered something because he actually got hired to work in Japan. So he went to Japan twice a year from the United States, a long flight, and he flew twice a year, even though he's terrified of flying. I mean, phobic, heart thumping, pale, white knuckles, feeling like he has the flu, that kind of fear. And he still flies twice a year because he needs to get there, and it's too long to go by boat. And he said, I discovered something. He said, when people say, I can't fly because I'm afraid, he said, they're deceiving themselves. The reason they don't fly is not because they're afraid. They don't fly because they don't buy a ticket. They don't walk down the ramp onto the airplane and fasten their seatbelt. So he discovered you can be afraid of flying and still fly. You can be shy and ask for a date. You can feel self-doubt and do something anyway. Many of us are waiting to feel confident before we'll try something in our lives. But you know, in reality, competence breeds confidence. Once you do something over time, you get better at it, then the confidence comes. You can't wait to feel confident to try something new. So it's those many manifestations of fear that appear in our lives. That's what we have to address. Cus D'Amato was a great boxing coach. For years he worked with boxers. And there's a lot of fear in boxing. You know, you're going into the ring to get battered and so on. And he said something, one of the wisest things about fear I've ever heard. Cus said, heroes and cowards feel exactly the same fear. They just respond differently.